This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome to the WalterFootball.com show. We're talking Week 4 NFL fantasy football, joined by Michael Hofer. Michael, how are you?
I'm great, Walter. It's great to be with you again.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kim, how are you today?
Hi, Walter. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great and looking forward to it.
I love the
Absolutely.
Fran Tarkenton jersey.
Woo! Yeah,
That's
that's
fantastic.
he's my man.
Great player, very exciting, one of the most exciting players of all time.
He is. He really is. Maybe we can get him on the show.
Or
Yeah.
maybe on the Vikings because they need quarterback help. Although
Uh,
they did well this past week, but we'll see how they do against the winning team. It's kind of Kirk Cousins is kind of dubious in that regard. Michael, how'd your Week 3 go in fantasy
well,
football?
I won. I'm glad you mentioned that because I had 8 matches and I was projected to lose several of them, and I won them all. I wasn't happy with some of my running backs, but I was one of the smarter guys that drafted Danny Dimes, and I'm in some deep leagues where we start 3 quarterbacks, and you can actually have 5 on your roster. So nobody else wanted him. They were picking all the fast guys, and I was very happy to draft Daniel late. And what a first game that was!
It was incredible. He had a fantastic game. That boggles my mind. By the way, you start 3 quarterbacks in a league. I've never been a part of a league like that.
It's a
It
fun
sounds
league.
sounds
I invited you into that league, and it's also we got a 40-man roster. Maybe next year, but you didn't want to do defensive players.
Yeah, I'm not too keen on defensive players because their production doesn't really match how good they are. For example, I used to always cite this. Darrell Revis used to be the top cornerback in the NFL all the time.
Oh yeah,
He was not a good fantasy defensive player because
right.
no one would throw at him.
Okay, you're only
So
talking about cornerbacks. Now I'm the commissioner of these leagues, and I changed the settings so that defensive players actually do get rewarded what they should, and they're equivalent to the offensive players. So in our league, almost everybody was keeping the offensive players, and a couple of us decided just to keep one player. I kept Darius Leonard. That was a very good choice, I think. The guy was fantastic last year, and now he's out with a concussion, but he might come back this week. It's a little, you see, anything that makes it more difficult, I think it's an advantage to guys who work like you and intelligent guys like you. So I really can't understand why you wouldn't want that additional edge. It's not that hard.
yeah, I guess I don't know. I think it's too much, and I feel like there's an edge already. Where you're in a typical league, people will draft kickers in the 8th round or something like that, or they'll take backup defenses, and that just seems completely unnecessary. And I think that's already you already have leverage on people like that. So I just never really found that interesting, the whole defensive player aspect of it. But we have tons of offensive players to talk about, including some first time starting quarterbacks. I know you wanted to mention.
Yeah, I wanted to have you rate the guys. We had 6 or 8 guys that started last week, which has got to be a first in NFL history.
Oh
Which
wow.
they've been making the game so much safer for quarterbacks, where you can't breathe on them, yet they're all biting the dust, or they're getting kicked out like Eli Manning, and rightfully so. So I was just,
Oh, you know what? They all should take a hint from Mahone in Kansas City, where his team just really protects him really well. I mean, so.
well, it's not that easy to just protect the guy. Like especially, oh my God, Baker Mayfield. They took away his starting guard, and now he looks like a totally different quarterback where he's having lots of trouble. But we can talk about Baker in a minute. Let's go to the new guys. I want to give you credit.
Yeah.
Calhoun, you really talked him up last week. I was skeptical, and he was fantastic. Is this the end for Cam Newton? And who had the best starting week and who had the worst starting week, if you could rate the new quarterbacks?
Well, I mean, the guy who has to stand out is Daniel Jones. He was fantastic in his first game. He was great in the preseason. I believe he was 24 of 30 on his passes. The only thing he did poorly in the preseason was that he fumbled a lot. I believe he had 3 lost fumbles, something like that. He might have fumbled again, and his teammate recovered. So it wasn't a surprise to see him fumble twice against the Buccaneers. So I think that's an issue for him going forward. Tampa has a very good defensive line. I think people
Yes.
undersell that. Their secondary has been bad for a while, but their defensive line this year is fantastic. Shaq Barrett had 4 sacks last
Oh,
week
yeah.
against Nate Solder, who's not a bad left tackle when he's healthy.
Yeah.
So they gave Daniel Jones a bit of a problem, and yet he still overcame it. He had that great drive at the end to win the game. It's a fantastic ending. Although Matt Gay should have hit that field goal. It was a brutal loss for the Buccaneers, and kind of typical for them over the years. They just haven't been able to solve their kicking woes. Although I do think Matt Gay is a good kicker. He just, he missed an extra point, but earlier in the game he drilled a 50-yarder. So it's not like he had a poor game overall. Just he missed the kick in the clutch, and I'm not willing to give up on him like some people are. But at any rate, Daniel Jones, he was awesome. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. So his upside in fantasy is phenomenal because he can run in the scores, and that's 6 points in most leagues compared to 4 for passing touchdowns. So Daniel Jones is the clear number 1 new quarterback. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm thrilled that I was right about him. I was skeptical at first when they drafted him. When I saw the way he played in the preseason, I was thinking, maybe they did know what they were doing. It's kind of surprising from kind of school he's from that he's doing that well in the NFL. But I guess you got to say Gettleman knew what he was doing for once.
Yeah, really. And you have to wonder where the Giants would be if they started him beginning of the year. I still don't think they beat Dallas, but they were in that Buffalo game, and Eli Manning just threw it away with a ton of bad passes. So I think the Giants could be 2-1 right now had they started Daniel Jones right away. The other quarterback.
But the problem is Saquon.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we'll get to Wayne Gallman in a bit. I think he's vastly overrated this week, but
I read that. I read you said that, and I was really wondering if I should pick him up, but I finally did.
Yeah, well, I mean, might as well talk about him now. Wayne Gallman, I saw that in daily fantasy, he's projected to be 35% owned in tournaments this week, which I think is a huge mistake. Wayne Gallman, he's in a good opportunity because he's starting in a good offense now with Daniel Jones, but he's not a good player. That's the problem, and that's definitely an issue. He might be in position to score a touchdown. Maybe he scores 2 touchdowns and has a good game, but if he doesn't get lucky and get into the end zone, he's not going to do well. I don't think he's a horrible play this week because they're playing the Redskins, not a good team, although their run defense is much better than their pass defense. But Gallman is someone I'm going to fade in daily fantasy.
How much are they charging for him?
I believe he's cheap. I believe he's like around 5,000. And they're not too many good values this week for running backs. So that's why people they're funneling their lineups into him. They want to get the expensive receivers and then pair them with Wayne Gallman. So it makes sense that people are using him. But if he gets 50 yards and no touchdowns, that's going to be 35% of the field that you can get leverage on in daily fantasy. So he's someone I don't think I'm going to have any lineups with Wayne Gallman. Just going to let everyone else play with him. And if he has a great week, so be it. I feel like he's going to have more bad weeks than good weeks. Going back to the first-time quarterbacks, you mentioned Kyle Allen. I loved him last week against Arizona, but I think his time to shine might be running out. He's going to play the Texans this week. And Houston gets tons of pressure on the quarterback. Their secondary, while not great, is better than Arizona's. And Arizona's their pace of play is so fast. That's one of the reasons why I loved Kyle Allen last week. Houston's pace of play is not as fast. It's not terribly slow either, but Kyle Allen's going to have a much tougher matchups. And if you look at what Romeo Crennel, the defensive coordinator for the Texans, has done against rookie quarterbacks, he really shuts them down. And technically, Allen's not a rookie, but it's his 3rd game as a starter.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to be in a lot of trouble this week. He fumbled twice last week, so I think that might be a problem for him, especially with J.J. Watt and Whitney Merciless bearing down on him. I think Allen's due for some regression, so I wouldn't go crazy with him. I think there are many better options this week than Kyle Allen. Do you agree?
So is he actually, when Cam is healthy, if Cam is healthy, is he going to actually spell the end for Cam Newton?
No, I think unless Kyle Allen proves me wrong and has a great year, they're going to go back to Cam Newton when he's healthy. The problem is that he has a Liz Frank injury, which is going to be a multi-week injury. So they're going to have to start Kyle Allen for the next month or so, at least. So we're going to see a big sample size in Kyle Allen. So if he's just mediocre or bad, Cam Newton obviously is going to come in when he's ready. But if Kyle Allen's winning games, They're just going to say, they're going to give that excuse where they say, oh, Cam Newton's not completely
Right.
healthy. We'll wait until he's, it's kind of like that deal. So we'll see what happens with Allen. I'm interested to see what he does against Houston, because while I'm doubting him, I'm not completely dismissing the possibility that he can be very good again. So there were some duds starting this week. Mason Rudolph, he was terrible against the 49ers, and that was a tough matchup. So I didn't really like him last week, but he was even worse than I thought he would be. He was just atrocious. You have to wonder what Pittsburgh was thinking when they traded a first-round pick for Minka Fitzpatrick, the safety. Fitzpatrick had a good game for them.
Great game.
Yeah, they still lost though. And if they keep losing, if Rudolph doesn't improve, Miami's going to have two top 5 picks in the 2020 draft, which is looking like a great draft class. So the Steelers, they would normally have a chance to find a successor for Ben Roethlisberger, but that's not going to be the case anymore. This trade looks terrible for them. I thought it was bad to begin with, and this looks awful now.
Oh man.
I grabbed him off the waiver wire immediately, and Fitzpatrick had a huge IDP day. So,
yeah,
the guy had immediate impact.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And Pittsburgh's secondary sucked. So I don't know if I agree with you on that. Big Ben's coming back next year, right?
He is coming back, but he's going to be 38 or 39. They need to find a successor for him. So can you imagine if they go 3-13 or something like that with Mason Rudolph, they'd be in position to draft Justin Herbert, the quarterback from Oregon, and that's a legitimate successor for Roethlisberger. And if now they don't have a first round pick, so they have to wait a couple of years. And what if Roethlisberger's never the same? He's going to be nearing 40.
That's possible.
Yeah, he's going to be nearing 40. We've seen quarterbacks drop off in their late 30s before. It's reasonable to expect we may never see the same Roethlisberger again. And so the Steelers could be bad for 2 years because of this trade. So, while they got a good player, I don't think they should have surrendered a first round pick for Fitzpatrick. If it was a second rounder, I'd be like, okay, that's a good move. First rounder, not so much. So I thought that was problematic. And so another new quarterback, Teddy Bridgewater for the Saints.
I got rid of Taysom Hill. Did I do the right thing? Because I had him in every league, and now I cut him loose because it looks like they just aren't going to use the right guy. What do you think?
Well, in your 5 quarterback league or 3 quarterback league where you start and you can have 5 quarterbacks, I think I would roster Taysom Hill because, just in case. Teddy Bridgewater did not play that well. He didn't play poorly, but he got away with a couple of possible interceptions. So if he was unlucky, he could have had a multi-turnover game, and now we might be thinking, okay, is Taysom Hill going to start? So I think there might be some bad times coming for Bridgewater. Not so much this week. I actually like the Saints this week. I think it's going to be a positive game script for them, which means I guess in millennial talk that means they're going to be ahead, so they don't have to throw that much. Yeah, so it was sort of the same last week. They had a touchdown on special teams, then they had a defensive touchdown, and Bridgewater didn't really have to do anything. So and plus Bridgewater had a very easy matchup against Seattle. This week the matchup's a little tougher, although Dallas has some injuries in their secondary, so I don't think it's too tough. I think Bridgewater could be okay. I would not use him in fantasy because I believe the Saints will be ahead in this game. So just someone to avoid. But if you're talking about rostering,
you think they'll be ahead?
Yeah, I think the Saints win this game.
Why?
I don't think Dallas is that good. I think Dallas might overlook the Saints. They're playing in New Orleans, where they're usually they have a great home field advantage. Dallas has Green Bay next week, so they could be looking ahead to that. The Cowboys have been lackluster in their first halves. Their past couple of games, they've looked lazy. Against the Redskins, they were down in the middle of the second quarter. Against the Dolphins, they're only up 10-6 at halftime against the worst team in NFL history, as I called them last week, and I still believe that to be the case. They haven't played well. I know, and they played 3 of the worst teams in the NFL. So I don't understand.
How do you think Josh Rosen did?
Rosen, I mean, he did exactly what I thought he would do. He threw some safe passes. He got unlucky with some drops, but the Dolphin players aren't trying, so they're going to drop passes. That's what they do. So this Miami team, I think you just ignore and not own anyone on Miami. If you're desperate in a very deep league, maybe Preston Williams, the receiver from the Dolphins. maybe him. I would consider using him in daily fantasy as kind of a very cheap punt at receiver. Other than that, this Miami team can be ignored. I said that Dallas would win in a blowout last week, and it was 10-6 at halftime. I was thinking about that. I was like, man, I was like, wow, I really blew that one. And then as bad as Dallas played, they still won by 25. And it's
It's
like,
a brawl.
yeah, it's this Miami team. They're not trying. Their top cornerback, Xavier Howard, just gave up on some routes, and Amari Cooper scored twice as a result. And I think the same thing is going to happen this week. Keenan Allen's going to have a big game unless some other players score touchdowns and then they don't have to throw. Keenan Allen's going to have a monster game against Xavier Howard. And every single charge, like I said last week, start any Cowboy you can find this week. Start any Charger you can find because the Chargers are favored by 16. I don't think that's by enough.
So does Josh Rosen have a future in the league?
I never liked Josh Rosen. I believe he has the talent to be a very good backup quarterback if he wants to be a very good backup quarterback. He's accurate downfield. He doesn't have a great arm, but he has the accuracy and the intelligence to be a very good backup, maybe even a pedestrian starter. The problem with Josh Rosen is that he's not invested in the football. He just doesn't love football.
You said that last week. That's right.
He has other interests. And, if I'm looking for a quarterback, I want a guy who lives and breathes football. And I mentioned Carson Wentz as an example where Carson Wentz was on a date one time. And during the date, he was watching football on his phone. Like, that's how much he loves the game. Josh Rosen.
Not a great guy to date, but a great guy to bet on for football, right?
Yeah, and that's what you want, right?
Exactly.
I'm high on guys like that who live and breathe football. Like Kyler Murray's another example. Yeah, he's short and stuff, but he loves football. And he gave up baseball. He gave up a guaranteed contract in baseball just to play football. And he loves it. So I know at least he's going to give his full effort. Whereas Josh Rosen, he's going to have other interests. If he even said if football doesn't work out, he can succeed elsewhere. And as soon as I heard that, I'm like, okay, this guy's not fully invested in the game. So why would I believe he can be a starter?
Okay, so I did really well with my teams this week, but I was really disappointed in some of my running backs. James Conner, Joe Mixon, and the Kansas City backfield. It's going to take you're a genius to figure that out. But what the heck is going on with Kerryon Johnson? You know the Eagles. Are the Eagles' defense that good against the runner? Is something wrong with Kerryon?
The Eagles' defense is fantastic against the run. Like, not only do they have a great defensive line, they also sell out to stop the run. Like, so they actually put extra emphasis in stopping the run, which I don't know if that's a good idea because their secondary is atrocious and they need to fix their pass defense. The run defense is phenomenal though, so it's going to be very difficult for anyone to run on them. You saw week 1, the Redskins couldn't run on them. Week 2, Devontae Freeman barely did anything. Week 3,
he hasn't done anything all year.
Yeah, that's true. Although last week he was okay. Like if you started him, like you weren't like very disappointed. Freeman had his best game, but yeah, if you're going against the Eagles, so like Thursday night, I don't think you're going to sit Aaron Jones because he can get a touchdown or two, but I don't think he's going to have a good rushing output. So, if you're doing the showdown slate on those daily fantasy sites, I would not use Aaron Jones too much. Maybe sprinkle him in here or there if you're doing multiple lineups. But if you're doing one lineup, I'm not going to have Aaron Jones in it.
Okay.
Yeah, but to mention to answer your question, Kerryon Johnson, I think that you could take a positive out of that game, the week 3, even though he didn't have a great performance.
He got a lot of touches.
Exactly. His snaps were up, his touches were up because they got rid of C.J. Anderson, and so I think in better matchups, Kerryon Johnson could have a big week, and I actually like him a lot this week against the Chiefs. So
awesome.
Kansas City's run defense is very poor, and Kerryon Johnson in a shootout, he can score a touchdown. He maybe even get 100 yards, but I think something like 70 yards and a touchdown, I think is something you can expect.
Yeah. And CJ just worked out with Houston, and Houston's backfield's a mess too.
It
we
is.
Still haven't talked about Joe Mixon either, and Connor.
Right.
What's going on with them?
The 2 AFC North running backs. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with Joe Mixon. He's a phenomenal talent. The problem is that Cincinnati's offensive line is a disaster. They lost their starting guard to retirement. They lost their starting right tackle to a season-ending injury, and then their left tackle has been out with a concussion the entire year. So 3 members of their offensive line that they thought were going to start heading into the year are gone. and so they can't block at all. If you watched last week's game against Buffalo, Andy Dalton was constantly under pressure. They couldn't open up any running lanes for Joe Mixon. I think once Cordy Glenn, their left tackle, comes back from injury or his concussion, we don't know when that's going to be, but once that happens, I think Joe Mixon's production will rise. So I think he's someone you can buy low in fantasy if you're in your long league. You can maybe trade. You could trade for him. So I think that's a good opportunity. To
get when AJ comes back too, that ought to help.
Exactly. So the teams are going to be focusing on Green. So that'll open up running lanes for Mixon, and Mixon's going to get work in the passing game too. So that's a bonus. Conversely, Connor I think he's in trouble because, the opposite's going to happen. Whereas, for Green, for the Bengals, Green's going to come back to help Mixon. For the Steelers, they lost Antonio Brown. So that sucks in the defense toward the line of scrimmage. And not only that, Ben Roethlisberger is out now. So unless Mason Rudolph scares people into thinking that he can throw downfield, all teams have to do is load the box against Connor. And Connor's not going to do anything unless he's in a fantastic matchup. So I would try to sell out of James Conner unless you can't get anything from him. I don't like selling low, but if you can sell medium on Connor, then I would definitely do that.
I should have listened to you last week when you told me good luck on the trade I had with Antonio Brown. Well, it didn't take long for him to just be worthless.
Wow.
He was at his height ever for trading when he was a Patriot, and then I didn't trade the guy. And I feel so dumb now because I normally don't have low character guys like that on my teams, but what a disaster that was.
Yeah,
it's amazing how one incident like that can just really destroy a person's career. But they're not thinking. They're not thinking about what, things like that are so easy to prove nowadays. I mean, we've seen this happen several times in the last 10 years, and these guys, they're just not thinking, and it's really sad.
And he was in a safe place too in New England where they watched everything he was doing, had him totally controlled, but then he had to go text somebody. I mean, just how dumb can you be? Josh Gordon last year, they had guys with him all the time, and he still went out and relapsed. But Josh Gordon, I think, has much better chances of actually, and I think he really wants to change. Antonio Brown is just, what an idiot.
Yeah, I mean, you can't say Josh Gordon's a bad guy. Like, he's been in trouble for, some stupid stuff. He's just, you call him dumb, but he's not a bad guy. Whereas Antonio Brown, he's done some bad things. He's been accused of doing some bad things. And then those texts where he sent, he showed pictures of people's kids. No, you can't do that. And I think that was the final straw. So the Patriots had no choice. So they correctly cut him. And I can't see Brown playing in the NFL at all. Like he has to be absolved of these accusations completely.
Yeah, I heard Skip and Shannon this morning. Shannon was talking about he made a tweet about Robert Kraft. I didn't even see that. What did he tweet?
I don't pay attention to what Shannon Sharp says. So I don't know.
Yeah. But apparently Antonio said something negative about Robert Kraft too, which is
it doesn't surprise me. He's been in a downward spiral ever since he had that horrible concussion against the Bengals in the playoffs. Vontaze Burfict nearly took his head off. Brown used to be, I feel like, a normal person where you didn't hear anything bad about him. Maybe he was a little bit arrogant, but he never did anything bad off the field. And ever since that concussion, he's gotten worse and worse. It started with recording the locker room, the Pittsburgh locker room, and then you have all these accusations that happened in the past couple of years, and now he's texting pictures of people's kids. You can't. Like he needs help. He needs professional help, and he doesn't need to play football at this moment. So, it sucks if you drafted him in fantasy. I avoided him completely, but I think he's a mess right now. He needs help.
Okay, now
just a question, guys. What happens in fantasy football? They get cut in the real football. Do you get an option to draft somebody else? Or
no, you have one draft. Now, once you have your roster, you have to decide whether to bench the guy or cut the guy.
Okay.
Right. And so, Antonio Brown is probably released in most leagues. You have your draft before the season starts. And so if you choose to pick Brown, he's on your roster, and you can trade him or whatever, or you can cut him. But normally someone as talented like that is going to stay on your roster. But given that he's not going to be playing in the NFL anymore, you might as well cut him from your fantasy team. So there's no point in owning him because you might need the roster space. Whereas, if you're playing daily fantasy, it doesn't matter. If you had Brown the previous week, you could just not
Right.
use Brown this week. So that's the appeal of daily fantasy, is that, it's, if you screw up your draft in the year long, you're just gonna have a miserable team and you're not gonna be interested. But in daily fantasy, if you have a bad week, you just come back the next week and do very well. So I like that.
Bingo.
Okay, Andy Reid, you suffered or prospered with Andy Reid for years. So I would think you understand him as well as anyone. And last week I drafted Darwin Thompson, so I picked him up again. And I don't know if they tell the truth about Damian Williams either. They're being very shady about his injury. They aren't saying how long he's going to be out. I mean, he might be done for all we know. But now Shady's hurt again, but the guy was Darrell Williams. So I picked him up. What's the deal? Is he somebody you can rely upon? Or can you ever count on Andy Reid when it comes to running backs? Because he forgets that he has a running back sometimes. So what's going on there?
I like to play on words there with the shady things and the I have to, I get things wrong. And when I heard the pregame reports that LaShawn McCoy was going to be the third running back, some team beat writer, I forget who it was, he said it was going to be Darrell Williams and Darwin Thompson, then LaShawn McCoy. I had LaShawn McCoy in about, I believe, 20 or 25 of my DraftKings lineups. As soon as I heard the news, I took him out of every single lineup. I put in Darrell Williams, and that really cost me.
Because, oh wow!
Yeah, it's you never know, and the beat reporter said it, so I thought I took it as gospel, and it didn't work out. I'm at a loss here. I wish I wish someone could tell me, because I don't think anyone knows. I don't think Andy Reid even knows what he's going to do, because these guys they're all in a great situation. LaShawn McCoy, I think, has a ceiling where he can't play as many snaps as he used to be able to, but LaShawn McCoy could always score 2 touchdowns like he did against the Ravens. So while he has a snap count ceiling, he can be a great fantasy producer. Darrell Williams, that was very confusing to me, because what I thought was going to happen was Darrell Williams is going to start get most of the carries, and then Darwin Thompson is going to get the receptions. But Darrell Williams, he got fewer carries than LaShawn McCoy, but he got more receptions than Darwin Thompson, which didn't make any sense to me, because I thought Darwin Thompson was the better receiving back than Darrell Williams. So it's complete illogic to me what they're doing. So I think, I think this is a situation to avoid at the moment. You could take a stab in daily fantasy and try to hit a home run with one of these guys. But in year-long fantasy, it's tough. I would pick up Damian Williams. I had a question from my friend actually earlier today. He asked if he should pick up Damian Williams because someone dropped him. I would, but he could be out for a while. We never know. But if he returns in a week or two, he could go back to his role, and I think he's definitely worth owning.
Okay. Now, there's a receiver that has set an NFL record for his first 3 starts. He's not had less than 7 targets. He's not had less than 5 receptions. He hasn't gone for less than 80. He's averaging 80 yards. He's had a touchdown every game. He's on a team that absolutely sucks, the Washington Redskins, and that would be Terry McLaurin. I think he almost is a must start now. What do you think?
It's looking that way. Terry McLaurin, Scary Terry, as his nickname is, he's been phenomenal through 3 weeks. Like you said, I mean, he's great. He's a fantastic route runner at Ohio State. He really shined in the Senior Bowl, which is when I really took it really caught my attention. So I like them a lot. I know some people liked him even more. Someone in one of my fantasy leagues drafted him in the 12th round. That's how much he liked McLaurin. So it's not a surprise. Well, I guess I should say it's a
third round draft choice.
Yeah, right. I should say it's a surprise that McLaurin is producing on this sort of level, but I'm not surprised that he's become a viable fantasy player. I would say that yes, he should be starting, but there is a caveat here, and that would be Case Keenum's health. Case Keenum did not practice Wednesday, and so Dwayne Haskins might have to start. So I would still use McLaurin. But if Haskins is starting, we don't know what sort of chemistry he has with McLaurin. So he might decide to throw to someone else more often, maybe Paul Richardson or Trey Quinn. But I think McLaurin is very talented, and he runs terrific routes, so he's going to get open. So I would definitely start McLaurin and use him in daily fantasy. He's very cheap this week. I think he's like 4,500 on DraftKings. So
That's ridiculous. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great price, and yeah, he's like I said, he's a terrific player. So I like him a lot. He's awesome. It's amazing that these rookie receivers have done so well, like Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown for the Ravens. He's great too. So yeah, you can start these guys for sure.
So does Jay Gruden know what he's doing, or is he on borrowed time?
So my picks podcast partner Jacob Kamaker, he made a bet on Jay Gruden for the first coach to be fired, and during halftime I texted him. I said, "Congrats on winning your bet." They were down 28-0. They made a late run to make the margin a little slimmer. But it sounds like Jay Gruden might be fired. In fact, I think if this weren't a shorter work week, they might have been inclined to fire him this week. It seems like they're not playing. It seems like they're not playing very hard for him. And if players aren't playing hard for a coach, there's no reason to have that coach on. So it kind of makes you wonder why they didn't fire him heading into the season to begin with. I don't think he's going to last much longer.
And he's saying that Haskins hasn't learned the system yet. So was that a mistake even drafting the guy?
I wasn't too big a fan of it. Haskins, I thought, was very raw. It's going to take him a couple years to become a viable starting quarterback in the NFL. So I wouldn't have used a 15th overall pick on him. Second round, sure, but 15th overall I thought was too early. In fact, I thought Daniel Jones was too early, not because of his talent, but because the Giants could have gotten Josh Allen, and then with their 17th overall pick, maybe they trade up past the Redskins and then take Daniel Jones. So I think these teams took their quarterbacks a little too early, although Jones has been great. Haskins, it was shocking to me that he didn't play in the second half of that Monday night game. It's like, why not? You're down 28-0. What do you have to lose? The Bears are going to be playing prevent. It's a nice opportunity for Haskins to get his feet wet. Like, why not? And he didn't. But Case Keenum didn't practice Wednesday, which is a concern. So we'll see what happens.
The San Francisco 49ers have been an absolute shock to me. I really don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is that good. I really like Raheem Mostert. I always thought that he might be the best guy in the backfield, but trying to figure out the running back to start there, you got the other guy vulturing touchdowns, you got Matt Breida, and then what happens when the starter comes back? I mean, have you figured out the 49ers?
Well, they're just splitting carries at this point. Like they don't really trust any of these guys to handle the workload. Matt Breida is the most talented player in that backfield, but Breida seems to get injured every other game. Like he'll have a carry one game and then he'll just sprawl out on the field, and you think, oh my god, like this guy tears Achilles, or like is he going to need to go to the hospital, and then he returns like later in the game. It's the most bizarre thing in the world. But he seems to leave the game every other week, and so I don't think the Niners trust for him to run the ball that much. So that's why they're getting Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. involved. So you can't really start any of these guys, well, especially this week because they're on bye. But you can't start any of them. Tevin Coleman is gonna. I think he might be back week 5 or maybe week 6. So I think Coleman, once he returns, is going to handle most of the workload. By most, I mean like maybe 40%, and then Breida gets 30%, and then Mostert gets 25%, and then Jeff Wilson Jr. gets 5%. It's a very dicey situation. It's one I would like to avoid. If you drafted Coleman, I guess you have to start him unless you have another good option. But yeah, it's a tough spot. And what you said about Garoppolo, he's kind of like the weak link of that team. That defense is phenomenal. The offensive line is great. They're running the ball like very well. They have some good weapons at receiver. Just Garoppolo seems to be making mistakes. And,
Debo had a great preseason, and now it looks like he's the guy. I don't know why they aren't using Dante Pettis, but I guess Debo Samuel is the lead receiver there now. Is that right?
Seems that way, but Debo Samuel dropped the deep pass last week, so I don't know if he's going to be in the doghouse suddenly. Like there's no reason for Dante Pettis not to be getting more targets.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a very talented player. And then you have Jalen Hurts going to come back, the third round rookie. And I liked what I saw out of him in the preseason before he got hurt. So it's just a very muddled situation. I think the only person you can trust in San Francisco is George Kittle at this point, or their defense if they're playing an easy opponent. Other than that, yeah, they're spreading the ball around too much. It kind of reminds me of New England, where except for Julian Edelman and James White in PBR, you can't really trust any of these guys because like last week you saw James White was out on because his wife was in labor. So you'd think that Sony Michel would get more carries, and he didn't. It was Rex Burkhead, and so it's the same situation in San Francisco. They have so many guys that they can use that you can't really trust any of them except for Kittle.
Yeah, and New England's playing Buffalo this week, and I was trying to decide whether or not I should still start the Buffalo defense, and I think I should. They have done well against the Patriots in the past. That is an awesome defense. What do you think?
It's a great defense. I don't think I would use them this week because I just feel like there are better options out there that you can pick up. Like, for example, Tennessee against Atlanta. Like, no one's going to own Tennessee. You can probably pick them up. Matt Ryan has been an interception. Matt Ryan's been an interception machine this year.
Okay.
So, and his offensive line is a train wreck. So he's taking a ton of sacks. He's throwing picks. I'm going to be using Tennessee in daily fantasy. I think they have immense upside. Maybe they get a pick six or something like that.
But isn't their defense hampered by Marcus Mariota being so bad? They're on the field so long.
I actually like Mariota a little bit this week. I think he rebounds against Atlanta. Yeah. I think this is a great matchup. Mariota has been very poor the past 2 weeks, but he's played some very good defenses. Indianapolis' defense is very good, and then Jacksonville has a terrific defense. Now he gets Atlanta, who Atlanta just lost their starting safety, Keanu Neal. They can't stop. Right, they can't stop the run. So Derrick Henry, I think, is going to have a terrific game. Should set up some nice plays for Mariota. The Falcons can't cover tight ends. So Delaney Walker, I think, is a great play this week.
What's the spread in that game?
Atlanta's favored by 4. I think Tennessee wins outright. Yeah, Atlanta's just a mess. Their offensive line can't block at all. They have a ton of things wrong with that roster. I think, we talked about Jay Gruden maybe getting fired. I think Dan Quinn might be on the chopping block as well. Considering they had, I thought they could make the playoffs this year, but they've been such a big disappointment. So I think, when you have a disappointing season, that tends to lead to coaches being fired. And they already fired their coordinator last offseason. So the next guy to go is usually the coach. So I think he might be fired.
Yeah, and he was such a great defensive coordinator, but they just have not been able to get a defense in Atlanta. You're right.
They haven't been able to stop the run in years, which is just mind-boggling to me. Like every, I do NFL mock drafts on my website, and every year I slot a defensive tackle to them, thinking that they're going to finally fix their defensive line and fix their run defense, and they don't take a defensive tackle ever. In fact, in my 2020 mock draft, I have them taking a defensive tackle. Like, it's probably not going to happen, but I think that's what they need to do, and they just don't do it.
So last week you said you thought Aaron Rodgers might be hurt. It's hard to tell from the Denver game, wasn't it?
Yeah, they didn't throw that much. He didn't look injured, but the stats were still meager. And, to be fair, he's played some very tough defenses so far. Chicago, Minnesota, Denver, those are 3 of the better defenses in the NFL. And this is finally a week where he's playing a team that's not very good against the pass. And so Rodgers, I have him projected here. If you can see on my Excel sheet, I have him projected for 22 fantasy points, which is it's like in the 8 to 10 range of quarterbacks this week. So you can definitely start Rodgers this week. I think he's a good matchup. I mean, Philadelphia's secondary has been a mess. Ronald Darby, I don't know what happened to him, but it seems like he forgot how to play football. He just can't cover anyone anymore. And the rest of the secondary is just bad. They tend to sell out against the run, as I said earlier. So that should lead to Rodgers throwing more. And this could actually be the first time the Packers trail by more than 3. I think the Packers will win this game, but there's definitely a chance that they'll be down by a touchdown because Philadelphia has a great offense. So if the Packers are down, that means Aaron Rodgers is going to have to throw more. And that also means that your boy, Geronimo Allison, might have a good game. I was very down
That's
on
a
Allison.
good test on that, yeah.
I was very down on Allison last week, and he had -1 yards for the game. It was terrible.
Yeah.
And he dropped the pass, but this week he's still playing a lot of snaps, and he's running a lot of routes, and so he's going to have an opportunity to catch some passes, and especially if they're down. I have him projected for 4 catches, 60 yards, 10
Not
PPR
bad.
points, which is just fine. But if they're down, if they're way down, and they have to throw a lot, he could have a monster game. So I think in like daily fantasy, he's one of those high upside guys you want to use in tournaments.
Oh yeah.
Low floor, high ceiling guys.
Wow.
Yeah, he's definitely someone I want to have a captain in the showdown slates.
So who would you pick between Rodgers and Stafford playing the Chiefs?
I think I have Stafford 1 point higher
Yeah.
than Aaron Rodgers. So the Chiefs are going to be be up in this game. The Lions. I like the Lions, but Patrick Mahomes seems unstoppable right now, and you have to believe that the Chiefs are going to they're going to score 30 points, which means the Lions are going to have to throw a lot. So
He's doing awesome. I mean, he's definitely. I don't think it's a run of luck either. I think he's got the right team to work with.
Right, and not only that, I mean, he has all the talent in the world. He also has great coaching. He has a great supporting cast, and as you said earlier, he has good blocking as well. So he's just in a great spot. He's on pace to throw for something like 6,300 passing yards, which would break all sorts of records. He's a great player. Mahomes is. I mean, he's the de facto #1 quarterback every single week. I can't imagine a situation which he's not, unless they're projecting like 50-mile-an-hour winds in a game. Then maybe you don't use him. But yeah, I mean, he's the guy. He's the #1 quarterback by far every single week. In both year-long and daily fantasy, even though he's priced up in daily fantasy, you still want to use him.
Well, as much as Andy Reid drives me nuts, you got to give Andy Reid credit for Mahomes, because Andy Reid also had a guy named Brett Favre that he covered for him and developed him when Favre was driving Mike McCarthy crazy. So Andy Reid has a lot of experience in this area.
Reid is a fantastic guy with quarterbacks. You look over the years. You mentioned Favre. He developed Donovan McNabb.
Yep.
He got AJ Feely to take the team
Yeah.
to the playoffs.
Yeah.
Jeff Garcia had a resurgence under him. You look at Michael Vick played well under Andy Reid.
Yes.
Alex Smith took the Chiefs to the playoffs under Andy Reid. It seems like this guy has the golden touch. It seems like every quarterback except for Kevin Cobb, who's played under Andy Reid, has played well above his talent level. And then you have a guy who's Patrick Mahomes, who has great talent to begin with. That's why Mahomes is playing like someone saying he's the Michael Jordan of quarterbacks right now. We've never seen anything like this. Like even Peyton Manning, it seems silly to say like, oh, Mahomes is better than Manning because Manning's one of the best quarterbacks of all time. But what Mahomes is
and
doing,
my favorite.
what Mahomes is doing right now is unbelievable. Like it's 350 yards every single week, and like no one's has ever done this. And
he's definitely setting records. I think he found himself this year, right? I think he's just and again, he's got a great team protecting him, and that you need to believe in yourself. But I want to tell you what, even in when you own your own company, when your team believes in you and covers you like that, you play harder, you play your best, and he just looks like magic on the field, like Russell Wilson. He looks like magic.
Yeah. And the scary thing is that this past Sunday was only his 20th career start. So he's just going to get better. Once, and he's a smart guy. Like he's a high intelligence guy. But once he gets, once the game even slows down more for him, like in his 4th or 5th year, and he realizes what the defense is doing, like he's just going to be even more lethal. It's scary, like what this guy's going to develop into. Will not be surprised if he wins 3 or 4 Super Bowls in his career. Like that's how good he is.
Yeah, I mean, and I hate to say this, it's like you said, Peyton Manning, he was one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, just like this guy, and he's also one of my favorites, and I got to meet him last year. But I think he is. I think you're right. I think he's going to be right there at the top.
Yeah. So to go back to your original question, Michael, that Mahomes is going to throw for a bunch of yards, touchdowns. The Chiefs are going to be scoring in the 30s, maybe even the 40s. That means Stafford's going to throw a lot. So Stafford is a very appealing option this week. You know, he's not always appealing because the Lions don't play with a fast pace, but they're going to have to throw a lot. So Stafford is definitely someone I like a lot.
And he's made a remarkable comeback over last year when he was like a lot more hurt than people knew, and his wife was going through the issues with the brain issues. Yeah, he might be comeback player of the year. Who's done better as a comeback player this year? Can't even think of anybody.
Yeah, no one really comes to mind. I'm sure a couple hours after we're done recording of nominated for nothing on this guy. But Stafford's been great. He was hurt last year, and he's had a new coordinator this year, and Darrell Bevell, who's maybe I don't know if they don't have an award for a comeback coordinator of the year, but I think Bevell definitely deserves that because he was run out of Seattle. They didn't want anything to do with him, and he's been great so far with Stafford. So we'll see if that holds up. But
and he was great with Brett Favre in Minnesota.
Yeah. It's nice that Bevell has kind of gotten his career back on track after a couple of bad years in Seattle. And speaking of Seattle, so we mentioned Mahomes is my number one quarterback this week and every week, but Russell Wilson's my number two quarterback. I have him projected for 31 fantasy points. 340 yards, 3 touchdowns, 30 rushing yards, and the 3-point bonus for the 300 yards. Arizona plays, as I said last week, they play the fastest pace in the NFL. It's, usually when you watch a game, you'll see a team snap the ball with like 6 seconds left on the play clock, 8 seconds, something like that. Arizona constantly snaps it with 20 seconds left on the play clock. So they run a ton of plays, they throw a lot, and, that means the other team will get a ton of possessions. And then when you factor in the fact that Arizona's defense is not good at all because they're missing their 2 starting cornerbacks and they don't know how to cover tight ends. I don't even know if they know what a tight end is. Basically, based on how tight ends have produced against them this year. It's been unbelievable. Like TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews, and then Greg Olsen last week. These guys have had career games against them. They just don't cover tight ends. They just leave them wide open. And I like Will Dissly a lot. There's another guy.
Nice crumb from the waiver wire that I took out of desperation. He's looking great now.
He's looking great. And by the way, they traded
Seattle. They traded away the other guy, yeah.
They traded away their backup tight end, Nick Van Nett, to the Steelers. So that means Will Dissly, who despite his production the past 2 weeks, he actually didn't run a ton of routes. Now he's going to run more routes with Van Nett gone. So he not only does he have a great matchup this week, he's going to get more opportunities. So he can have a monster game. This 6 catches, 80 yards, I think is very pessimistic. He could the 14 fantasy points I have for PPR. He could blow that out of the water. He could score 2 touchdowns potentially, like Greg Olsen did last week. I like to see a lot. Basically, anyone in the Seattle-Arizona game. It's kind of like I heard the comparison that if you play daily fantasy baseball, Coors Field where the Rockies play, those games tend to be like 12-10, 13-11 because of the atmosphere. The thin air means more home runs. I feel like Arizona is sort of the Coors Field football now because of the fast pace of play Arizona plays. Everyone in these games has monster fantasy games. So, if you're in a league and you see some viable Arizona or Seattle players, pick them up. If you're playing daily fantasy, try to get as many Arizona and Seattle players as possible in your lineups because they're just going to post just monster games.
That's really great advice.
Yeah. Although I think the one exception this week is Chris Carson. Chris Carson.
Oh, yeah. I saw the name Rashad Penny, and I'm wondering, why isn't everyone giving up on that guy? How many times has he disappointed? You actually like Rashad Penny?
Well, my like for Penny is related to my dislike for Chris Carson. So Chris Carson has fumbled 3 times this year, and he had that fumble last week, return for a touchdown. Not only that, it was weird. He slipped 4 times on the field last week. He even changed his cleats after the second time he slipped, and yet he was still slipping. I have no idea what's going on with him. I think the coaching staff is going to be more willing to give Rashad Penny more opportunities this week if Penny's healthy. The question is if Penny's even going to play, because he suffered an injury last week. If Penny's out, then yeah, you can use Chris Carson because they won't have an alternative. But if Penny comes back, Penny is someone I have interest in. I don't think anyone's going to be on him. So I think he's worth a shot, especially in this fast-paced game where he's going to get a ton of touches.
Well, I've been pretty disappointed with Pete Carroll's running backs over the years too. You just can't trust the guy, and you can't trust what comes out of his mouth. He outright lies.
Yeah, and I don't blame him. You don't want a coach to be completely transparent. So yeah, unless you're playing fantasy, and then you get mad. But yeah, it seems like ever since
Maybe he thinks it's fantasy football, and that's why.
Right. Yeah, maybe he doesn't want his league mates to know what he's doing. And yeah. Right. Yeah. Ever since Marshawn Lynch left, the Seattle's running backs, they just been a mess. So it's hard to trust these guys, but I'm willing to give Penny a shot just based on how bad Carson's been through 3 weeks.
The worst, one of the worst in history of my experiences. I don't know why I tuned in to the Tampa Bay Buccaneer pregame show. I rarely do this, but of course they're interviewing John Gruden, and it was back when Joey Galloway was actually relevant, but he hadn't played all year. And Gruden says, "I'm letting the tiger out of the cage today." So I dropped. I benched Marcus Colson, put in Galloway, and he didn't do a damn thing. So Gruden outright lied. Why would you lie 5 minutes before the game in a pregame show? Why? You're not helping the other team. You're talking to local people, and you're outright lying to them.
Yeah. Do you think he was thinking that the other coaches were watching the pregame show?
Yeah, exactly. They weren't.
Doesn't make any sense to me that they would do that.
Letting the tiger out of the cage. You hear a coach say that, you're going to start the guy.
Yeah, I don't understand. I really that's why it's hard to trust these beat writers, because coaches lie, and so they're getting their information from the coaches, but you can't trust the coaches. So it's like it's secondhand information that's not good information in the first place. So it's very difficult to trust these beat writers. I think after that McCoy debacle, I'm even less willing to trust beat writers. So maybe I'll keep McCoy in the lineups next time. We'll see. I don't know if you had anything else. I don't know if you had any other topics you wanted to get to. Otherwise, we can get to our top plays for the week.
Yeah, go ahead and do that. But I will say Jason Wilde is an exception, I think, on the beat writers. He is pretty sharp about not just listening to coaches, going with what he sees. He's one of the better ones. But he also picked Kumaro, and Kumaro hasn't done anything yet. But that's a guy we're keeping in the background. But I think Jason Wilde can be trusted.
Yeah, Kumaro's run like 4 routes, I think, this year. Yeah, I feel like they'd use him more. They only have 3 viable receivers. So, and, as I said before, the Packers have been either up or only trailing by 3 this entire year. So maybe if they're in a negative game script, which in millennial talk is if they're behind and they have to throw a lot, maybe they use Kumaro a lot more. So I think the opportunity there is there for Kumaro. But obviously you can't trust them until you see it. Like
I hate the coach right now, but they're 3-0, and I don't know what to make of that.
It's tough because I think if they were 1-2, you'd hear reports about how Aaron Rodgers is unhappy that he's not throwing a lot.
Exactly.
Like you'd see all this stuff. Like during the games, Aaron Rodgers is giving Matt LaFleur stink eyes, like some serious stink eye, and like it's like. If they were losing, like you would really hear reports about this. But they're winning because of their great defense. And plus, Rodgers is still playing well. Just he's not producing like an elite fantasy player, but he's still playing very well. So yeah. All right. Top fantasy quarterbacks this week. I mentioned Mahomes and Wilson, so we can skip them. Kyler Murray. He's the other half of that Seattle-Arizona game. I think Murray this week. He really struggled last week. He took 8 sacks. Didn't play that well. He could have thrown a couple of interceptions, but he was playing a very good Carolina defense, which Carolina's pass rush is phenomenal this year after they added Brian Burns through the draft, and then they added a couple other guys like Bruce Irvin. And they already had K'Wan Short. And Carolina's secondary has played better than I expected. So it wasn't a surprise that Murray. Yeah, Murray's his struggles last week they weren't too much of a surprise. This week he gets Seattle, and Seattle allowed Andy Dalton to throw for 400 yards in week 1, and they allowed
That's
Mason
all you need
Rudolph.
to say.
I could say more. Mason Rudolph had a great game against them week 2, great second half at
Yeah,
least.
that's right.
And then Mason Rudolph did nothing last week. So it's kind of like telling how bad Seattle secondary is. And I feel like if the Saints were behind, Bridgewater could have had a good game. Like that's how bad Seattle secondary is. Kyler Murray's going to have a great opportunity. He might be behind. Even if he's not behind, Arizona throws a lot. So I think Murray's going to have a big game. Matt Ryan against Tennessee. I don't like Atlanta this week, but that means that Atlanta's going to be down, which means Matt Ryan's going to throw a lot. And that's actually what he's done all year. Atlanta's been down in the second half every single week, and Matt Ryan's had to throw a ton in the second half. And, in fantasy, you don't care when the passing yards come or when the passing touchdowns come. We saw last week with Russell Wilson. He had a monster fourth quarter fantasy-wise. They still lost. So you don't care what's going to happen. So I think Matt Ryan is someone you want to target this week. Daniel Jones, number 5. The Washington's pass defense is horrible. Mitchell Trubisky looked functional against them. Mitchell Trubisky threw three touchdowns to Taylor Gabriel on Monday night, which is unbelievable. And Daniel Jones is better than Case Keenum. He has better weapons than the Redskins do, or the Bears do outside of Allen Robinson. So, and then Saquon Barkley's out. So Daniel Jones is going to have to throw more. He's going to have to run more. So Daniel Jones is someone I like a lot this week. And then you have Deshaun Watson.
What number do you have him at?
Daniel Jones, number 5.
Wow, that is amazing for a second career start. That's got to be like a record, man.
Yeah, well, you know what? He was the guy. Daniel Jones was in the lineup on DraftKings of the guy who got second place in the $1 Million Maker last week. Wow. He had a monster game against Tampa, and Washington's defense is worse than Tampa's. So you think that Daniel Jones. You think Daniel Jones would do well. The only risk here is if the Giants are up big, and Daniel Jones doesn't have to throw a lot. But the Giants' defense is so bad that there's a chance that it could be a shootout again, which means Jones is going to have to throw more, run more touchdowns. He has great potential. So he's someone I'm going to be using in daily fantasy. You have Deshaun Watson, no surprise there. It's a tough matchup. As I said before, Carolina's defense is very good, but Deshaun Watson's a phenomenal quarterback. So you can't be too down on him. And then you have I mentioned Stafford, Philip Rivers a little bit ahead of Stafford. You have all these guys in the 23 to 22 range. They're all usable. Carson Wentz, Aaron Rodgers, Case Keenum might be a surprise here at 21 points. Anyone who's played against the Giants this year has had a great fantasy day. So I think Case Keenum is a good option this week, provided he plays. Because this is before I saw the Wednesday report that he didn't practice.
Right.
So that's obviously something you want to keep an eye on. But if Case Keenum plays, I like his matchup against the Giants. The Giants can't cover anyone.
Okay, so I noticed somebody's missing here, and it's a guy I drafted. I wait on quarterbacks. I drafted Baker Mayfield, and then several rounds later, Kyler was still there, so I picked up Kyler. What is going on at Baker Mayfield, and what's going on with the Browns? I mean, they need to come out against the Ravens. Baker is beginning to look like he's got some problems in Cleveland. He doesn't have the pass protection. He's not very tall. He had a great season last year, but what's going on?
The Browns got to play for the first time in forever, right? On Sunday night.
Yeah, Baker Mayfield's become a hero in the city of Cleveland, but the way he's looked this season, he is not, even in the preseason against the Packers, he didn't look good. What's going on there?
Yeah, and against Tampa in the preseason, he had a horrible game.
Yeah. That's the one I meant. I got my teams mixed up. Yeah, absolutely terrible against the Bucs. Yeah,
he was horrible. And I took that with a slight grain of salt because they didn't have Odell Beckham or Jarvis Landry in that game, so I thought he might be better. But he looked terrible. And you mentioned it. It's pass protection. They traded Kevin Zeitler, their All-Pro guard, to the Giants. So they lost him. His replacement has not played well. Their left tackle is Greg Robinson, who's just a train wreck. He was the second overall pick a few years ago. He's never played well in the NFL. He actually had a couple of decent games at the end of last season, which is why they brought him back. But he's been an abysmal blocker for Baker Mayfield. The right tackle Chris Hubbard. He's been in a walking boot. He's not healthy. He's not playing well. So they have 3 guys on the offensive line who are not playing well. And you need good blockers. And Baker Mayfield, the game hasn't slowed down for him. So unless he's releasing the ball right away, he's struggling. So, he has somewhat of a good matchup this week against the Ravens, who have injuries in the secondary. So I have him projected for 17 points. Could be a little bit higher, but I have him throwing 2 interceptions. So it really depends on how much you're penalized for interceptions in your league. I think Baker Mayfield could throw a couple of picks in this game. So that might drag it down. But if you're not penalized for interceptions, I think Mayfield could have a decent game, and you could use him.
From what you just said, I guess what you're saying is drop him if you got him in a regular league, but if you got him in a keeper league, you should hang on to him.
I wouldn't necessarily drop him. It really depends who's available. So it's kind of a tough question. If you can pick up someone good and drop Mayfield, sure, you could do that. But if there's a bunch of bums on the waiver wire, then don't get rid of Mayfield. Like, you can still use him if maybe they figure things out with their offensive line. Maybe Chris Hubbard gets healthier. Maybe Mayfield plays better in the second half of the year. I still think I wouldn't give up on him. But he's just not playing well right now. So there will be easier matchups where you can use him. This week is not really one of them.
No.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like, if he doesn't throw interceptions this week, he could do well. But I'm not. There are just so many better quarterbacks to use this week, so that's why I haven't ranked down. It's running backs. Christian McCaffrey, no brainer, number one. Austin Eckler. As I said before, get any charge.
Anybody against the Dolphins.
Yeah, get any charger you can find. I know Ezekiel Elliott didn't have a great fantasy week last week, but he still ran for 120 yards. He just got unlucky and didn't score touchdowns. That was the only thing. Like, Eckler could score touchdowns. Eckler's going to catch a ton of passes as usual, so he's someone you can use. Dalvin Cook. He has a tough matchup against the Bears, but Dalvin Cook has been amazing. No matter who he's playing, like he's just phenomenal. And the injury question mark is legitimate. Like, I think there's a good chance he gets hurt at some point, but as long as he's healthy, he's someone you could play. Derrick Henry, I mentioned how bad Atlanta's run defense is, so he's one of my top options this week. Ezekiel Elliott, not as high on him this week. The Saints' run defense is very good, and I think there's a good chance the Saints are up, which means Elliott's not going to run as much, but Elliott's still a phenomenal player, so I would have him in my lineups. No reason to sit someone like that. Kamara, same thing. Tough matchup, but he's too good of a player to sit. So, like, maybe you don't want to use him in daily fantasy, but he's still a great player. And then you have Nick Chubb, similar situation again. Great player, bad matchup. David Johnson, he's okay. And then you have a couple of these guys. Kerryon Johnson, as you mentioned earlier. So he's I believe he's like 10 or 11 here. So he's a guy and I should mention Josh Jacobs. Jacobs had a horrible week last week against the Vikings. This is an easier matchup. If Darius Leonard is out with a concussion again, they're going to be down Leonard. They're going to be down their top safety, Malik Hooker. So 2 of their best defensive players will be out. And the Colts run defense wasn't that good to begin with. So Jacobs is I think he's set to bounce back. So anything stand out here? Be there? Does anything stand out?
You made Kerryon sound really good. Marlon Mack has just been fantastic. I was skeptical about Aaron Jones, but you convinced me to go ahead and use him anyway. I think you covered things pretty well in the running backs.
Yeah, Jones I'm not crazy about, but yeah, he can always fall into the end zone. He did that twice last week in a tough matchup. So I wouldn't avoid him. But I mean, he's not a great matchup. But
I don't know what's going on with Darius Leonard, because I had him in IR and Flea Flicker made me put him back. But they say he's still in concussion protocol, so I don't understand that at all.
I don't know. That's weird. We don't know. Like, you never know how concussions will go. Like, one guy, if he suffers a concussion, he'll be out a couple days and he'll play the next week. Another guy will have a concussion and he won't return until 8 weeks later. Like, these things are very you never know with these concussions. You never know. Every player is different. So it's an unfortunate situation. Hopefully he recovers soon. Let's go to the receivers. Keenan Allen, no surprise, the Chargers, number one. Allen is going against Xavier Howard, who's a talented quarterback, but he doesn't look like he's trying right now. So we just saw Amari Cooper torch Xavier Howard. So I think Keenan Allen will as well. You have Julio Jones, another great player. Tyler Lockett is someone I love this week against Arizona. Arizona, as I said before, they're missing their top 2 cornerbacks. It's a high-paced game. Lockett I think is due for a monster game, and
Metcalf too, right?
Yep, I have Metcalf somewhere a little bit lower.
Okay.
I like Hopkins against the Panthers. I mean, another great player. Sammy Watkins is someone who hasn't produced as
Yeah.
well as people would imagine, but he's
Right.
still leading. He's still leading the team in targets. So I
Is it
think,
really more than
yeah,
Kelsey? Wow,
yeah, he has more targets than Kelsey.
that's
So
unbelievable.
right, and I think he's just due for positive regression. So I think he's going to have a big game at some point. Like he's going to have a monster 2 touchdown game at some point, kind of like Mike Evans last week. Like most people didn't play Mike Evans in daily fantasy, or like some people may even sat Mike Evans
Not me.
because right, yeah, well, me neither.
That
But
was a
some people,
juicy matchup.
yeah, some people like because Mike Evans did nothing the first 2 weeks of the year, so maybe someone sat him, like they're frustrated, and then he goes off for 3 touchdowns. I think the same thing is going to happen with Watkins at some point.
Wow.
Maybe it's not this week, but it's going to happen soon. Watkins is too talented not to do anything for a while.
Yeah, they paid him a ton of money too, so that would be why he'd be getting targets.
Yeah, and I mean he's the best wide receiver right now. Not counting Kelsey, he's the tight end, but he's the best wide receiver. So yeah, I'm more willing to take a shot on him.
He's got to
Than
be a good
just
value in the dailies too, right?
Yeah, he's I believe he's 6,800 if I remember
Wow.
correctly. So yeah, he's and the top guys are like 8,000. So he's that's good value. Odell Beckham is fine. Sterling Shepard is a guy who's risen a lot this week. It has to do with Saquon Barkley being out. So someone's going to have to get
Okay.
Barkley's receptions. Daniel Jones is playing better than Eli Manning has. So yes, right. So Sterling Shepard is a guy I love Evan Ingram as well, and we'll get to the tight end soon.
Yeah, Evan Ingram. Yeah.
Yeah, Kenny Galladay against the Chiefs. We like Stafford, so Stafford's receivers are going to do well. Julian Edelman, he practiced Wednesday, so that I wrote.
Yeah, why do you have him over Josh Gordon? Because of the cornerback matchup?
Well, Edelman is Brady's favorite receiver to begin with, and in this game, the Bills have a great pass rush, so they're gonna get to Tom Brady, which means Brady's gonna have to release shorter passes, which means more for Edelman, and then also you have Tre'Davious White, who's a fantastic cornerback. He's gonna be on Gordon, so I don't like Gordon this week. I like Edelman a lot more, provided Edelman plays. Edelman practiced Wednesday, so it's a good sign.
Oh, he's a tough guy. He will play.
Yeah, I believe so. And according to my dad, he's my fourth cousin. So I'm
really
always rooting for him. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I quick story. I was my mom used to be a hairstylist. So I was at my parents' house. She's cutting my hair. And my dad walks in from work and he goes, "Did anything happen to football?" This was in August, a few years ago. And it was the day after Julian Edelman tore his ACL. And I said, "Edelman got injured. He's out for the year." My dad goes, "Oh, it's too bad. You know he's your fourth cousin, right?" And then he just walked away. I'm like, "What?" It's like, "What are you talking about?" And then I asked him later, and he's like, "Yeah, I knew his parents. Like, I'm related to them." And I'm like, "Okay, I guess." So I've been rooting for Julian Edelman ever since. I don't know how.
Well, there are not a lot of Jewish players in the NFL. There's not a lot of short players. There's not a lot of white guys playing receiver. And when this guy walked onto the field in college, the starting quarterback there was actually practicing punts, and Edelman walked up to him and said, "You should keep practicing because that's all you're going to be doing this year because I will be the starting quarterback." And he was. I mean, that guy is amazing. His confidence is ridiculous.
He's phenomenal, and he's gotten the most out of his talent. You look at a guy like Edelman, you see him walking on the street, never think he's a football player, like not in a million years. And he's just been great in the NFL, especially in the playoffs. He's just rose to the occasion in the playoffs. It's okay. So Devontae Adams, against the Eagles, he's going to go off. I actually think this might be a lower projection. I might increase.
Well, he's
Adams
not happy right now, so he needs to. Yeah, there's going to be.
Is he healthy? How many injuries?
No, he's healthy. It's just a stupid offense from the stupid coach, but they're undefeated.
Right.
You think it'd be weird if they were losing, they might fix things, but they're winning. So I don't know if they're going to fix things. It's very weird, very weird. McLaurin, we talked about him, and then DK Metcalf, you just mentioned. Again, anyone in this Arizona Seattle game, just try to get them in your lineups. If you're playing daily fantasy, I don't even think it's crazy to get 5 guys in that game into your lineup. Get the quarterback, stack them with 2 receivers, and then go with 2 players on the other side. Just stack that whole game. It's going to be the fastest game in the league this week. There are going to be a ton of points, bad defenses all around. I think everyone's going to have a great game in that game. And Metcalf is getting nearly as many targets as Tyler Lockett is. And I think that Metcalf could have a monster game. He could have two, 3 touchdowns. So, I don't think it's crazy to think he could be the top fantasy receiver this week. Just,
I agree with you. It's a great family. Anybody named Metcalf has always been dynamic in the NFL.
It's true. That's very true. So anything
Marvin
else?
Jones, where's Marvin had a good game?
Last week he had a good game against the Eagles. And
really?
Yeah, he scored a touchdown. I believe he was close to 100 yards. I believe he was in the winning $1 million lineup.
Wow, that takes balls.
Yeah, it really does. And it's no one played him. So, you want these high upside guys. There are going to be a ton of points in this game. So I think he's worth a shot this week. And he's not getting that many fewer targets than Galladay. Like, it's been pretty even. So
yeah.
All right, let's go to tight ends.
I heard that Ty might be hurt this week.
Yeah, he's not practicing. He has a quad injury. So we'll see. If he plays, I obviously like him. It's a great matchup. But if he's out, obviously, then I don't like anyone on that Colts team. Maybe Marlon Mack. But the Colts are not going to score many points if Hilton's out. In addition to Devin Funchess, so it's like who's Brissett throw to?
Yeah.
Deion Kane, Paris Campbell. Like, these guys are not good.
Campbell, all that hype.
Yeah, I mean, he's got talent, but he's very raw. So I wouldn't trust him. So tight ends, Travis Kelce and Evan Ingram tied at the top.
Really? Wow.
If Barkley weren't injured, then Kelce would be the clear number one. But given that Barkley's out, someone's going to have to get his targets. Someone's going to get throws in the end zone, and it's a great matchup. Redskins have bad linebackers; they can't cover tight ends. So I like Ingram a lot. And then Zach Ertz, he was double teamed on almost every single play last week. And with Alshon Jeffrey back, that may not be the case this week. So I like Ertz to bounce back. Then with Darren Waller, the Colts are terrible against tight ends. Darren Waller has been phenomenal so far this year. So I like Waller. And then we have Mark Andrews and Will Dissly at 14 points. I think I'm going to raise Will Dissly's projection. Andrews is a question mark. He didn't practice Wednesday.
Yeah, lost the game last week.
Right. His absence was big for the Ravens. He's a great player when he plays, but we'll see if he practices. If he's not practicing at all this week, then I'm going to lower that, obviously. So there's that. And Delaney Walker, I like him a lot too. So anything else stand out here?
Well, I've got Mark Andrews and Greg Olsen in the same team, same league, and I was going to start Greg Olsen this week, but I didn't see his name up here. Why'd you keep him off?
So Greg Olsen's had 2 great matchups. Tampa Bay
day last week, didn't he?
Sorry, what?
Didn't he have a career day last week?
Yeah, he had 2 touchdowns. He had a big game. But again, Arizona can't cover tight ends, or they don't want to. I don't know what's going on there. He scored 2 touchdowns. It was a fast-paced game. We've seen tight ends against Arizona fall back down to earth. Remember Hawkinson week 1? He had a great game, and then he hasn't done anything.
Yeah, I remember.
He hasn't done anything since. Week 2, Mark Andrews, great game. Granted, he was hurt last week, but he wasn't doing that much when he was on the field. And so I think Greg Olsen could fall back down to earth. Tampa Bay and Arizona are 2 of the worst teams against tight ends in the NFL.
He even looked hurt against Tampa when he was doing that well. It looked like he was almost limping on his receptions.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And now he goes against the Texans, who have a very good defense. Kyle Allen, I think, is going to struggle. So I'm not as high on Olsen this week. I don't think he's a bad play. So 10 fantasy points to PPR is just fine. But I think they're just better guys that you can use.
So I should go back and start Andrews then.
If he's healthy, yeah. If he's practicing, sure. If not, then obviously Olsen.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. I think that's it for this week. Do we have anything else?
No, we don't. But what I would like to do is make sure that the viewers know that starting next week, you can dial in, have a front row pass, and ask this brilliant coach, Walter, questions, and ask this other brilliant coach, Mike, questions about fantasy football picks.
Hey, are you in
Absolutely.
any dynasty pools?
And I'll take the questions
I mean, Survivor.
and pass them. I'll pass all the questions to you guys.
Yeah, I'm in 6 Survivor leagues right now. Why do you ask?
The Chargers this week, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
anyone playing against Miami.
Yeah.
It's
You know
a
what?
it's a
Everybody but
Just hit them all
Miami.
year, and there's going to be a bunch of winners.
You know what's funny is, they're hosting the Super Bowl there, right? And a lot of great projects down there. Huddle 100, just a lot of benefit programs. I think they've done more outreach programs this year than ever before. It's been very exciting to talk to some of the people on the committees down there. And but yeah, I think it's funny you say that. I love that you don't hold the punches. It's just great.
why not be bold? So it's boring to be bland. So I think I say what I think, and yeah, the Dolphins are the worst team ever. So why not play against them in Survivor every week? Like it's kind of like it's a free square every week. It's bizarre, and I don't know. Like
Well, maybe if
it's
they
like
listen to this, they might get the game up. Maybe they'll figure it out. And I don't know, but we hit the Eagles pretty hard last week about their injuries. So hopefully, I, I'm coming on board. I want to learn more about fantasy football. As we all know, I'm a newbie and I'm going to start playing daily so I can learn a little bit more. But I'm having a blast. This is more fun than I've had in a long time because I think you can put more into it, and by picking your favorite people as opposed to just a full team. So I think
We got to listen to this guy when he has a strong opinion, because he said Calhoun last week, he was dead on that, and then he just killed me with Antonio Brown. So, well, good luck with that trade. I mean, I haven't had anything like that happen since I traded my son. I got Chris Johnson for Plexico Burris the night that he went out to the club and shot himself. So that's like one of the best trades I ever got. I mean, it's hard to prognosticate those things like Plexico, but man,
you can't predict somebody's personal life activities off the
yeah, but
field.
Walter did it
You
last week with
can't.
Antonio Brown. He did.
I mean, your picks were based on what they do on the field, not off the field. And I think that's
I
something
don't know.
to think about when you look at someone for your picks. Just like probably what they do when they pick their football players is what kind of person is this off the field? And because I think, Walter, just like you said, gosh, this guy's passionate about football. I mean, it's everything to him. He's not going to take any risk whatsoever to destroy his opportunities. And then you've got some football players out there that they're just in it for the game of money and play, just you know. So Walter, I think you have a good point there that you have to look at the passion.
And Walter's passionate, big time.
Oh, yeah, I love doing this. Yeah, I've been the site's been up for almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years in November. So, yeah,
Really?
I love doing this. Yeah,
Yeah, and he's in his
You've been doing
30s.
this 20 years?
Yeah, and he's in his 30s. That's incredible.
yeah.
Wow.
November
Wow.
1999 is when it started.
So are
So
we celebrating the 20th this year? We'll do a little celebration, right?
And he's this
sure.
knowledgeable about football, and he's still got a woman to marry him.
So we,
Yeah,
so we're kind of upgrading you on your 20th year. You're actually going to TV, so this is really cool. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I love doing this. And you were saying, you can be celebrated for the wins. I think you have to eat it when you get something wrong. So last week, one thing I did get wrong was Emmanuel Sanders. I love Sanders last week.
Yeah.
But I have to wonder if someone on the Packers was listening to our show, because instead of instead of instead of I love Sanders because I thought Tremont Williams, their 36-year-old nickel, was going to be on him, but they decided to shadow him with Jair Alexander every single play. Every single player, their top corner was on Sanders. So that's something I definitely missed. That's going to happen. But you never
I
know.
like that. We should do that every week. What we were right about, what we were wrong about.
Yeah,
I
for
like
sure.
that. Yeah.
I think I keep my old pages up on the site so people can see what I got right and what I got wrong, so people can trust that. So
Well, the
I think
thing
that's
is that you have to be able to admit that you make mistakes, otherwise you're not going to continue growing. And you learn from that. But what you learn the most is you don't have a crystal ball. You can't predict that somebody's what their personal life is going to do the night before a game and how it's going to affect them the next day. And so I mean, there's a lot at play there. An injury, lots of injuries.
Gary Anderson with the Vikings. Yeah, the guy hadn't missed a field goal all year, and his wife disappears, and they're going to the Super Bowl if he kicks it. They had Chris Carter, they had Randy Moss, and he missed the only field goal he missed all year.
Yeah, it's stuff like that happens all the time. Like even the Super Bowl, the Raiders Buccaneers Super Bowl, the Raiders center Barrett Robbins disappeared the night before the game. They didn't know where he was, and so you never know what can happen. So
yeah.
So you can't predict. You do a good job predicting what goes on the field, and and I think both of you do a good job of that. But what you've got to kind of weigh in the other factors, and that's hard. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so I think
guess,
yeah, that's it for this week. Good luck to everyone in your week 4 fantasy, whether that's year long or daily. Kim and Michael, it's been great talking to you. And yeah, you can go to walterfootball.com to get updated fantasy rankings. We'll have updates based on injuries and whatnot. So definitely check that out. And guys, I will talk to you next week.
Yeah, I love your jerks of the week too. That's always very funny.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a